everyone, it's Caroline or Miss B Overseas. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it, and you as always. Here's the thing, I hate wrap-ups. And as always, there's caveats to that statement. I like wrap-ups in theory, like I like that they're reliable content. I like that they don't require a whole lot of planning or like forethought that maybe a recommendations video or like fitting books into a theme, like a secret TBR type of video might require. I think that my real issue with wrap-ups is the amount of time. Typically here on Booktube, people do month-long wrap-ups, and that's what I have been doing. And I have watched my past few back, and I am just always dissatisfied with the way that I wrap up pretty much every single book. I feel like I am not clear. I feel like I don't say enough that I want to about the books that I am reading. And I know that the typical advice would probably be something like, don't over edit yourself, talk as much as you want to about the books that you want to. And like, I understand that, and that's all well and good, but left to my own devices, I could talk for hours about a book that I didn't even feel anything towards. So what we're going to try in the month of April, instead of waiting until the end of the month to wrap all of my books up, I am going to try like end of weeks, just reading bookish chats. I don't want to call it like an end of week wrap up because I don't even know. I'm going into this without a plan, which that's never worked out for anyone before, so who knows if this will even turn out well. The goal is kind of just to talk you through books that I finished, books that I'm in the middle of reading, books that I maybe plan to pick up next, and we're gonna try this out for the month of April. It could go terribly, but I just want to find a way to talk about books in a way that works for me and in a way where I'm not dreading the end of the month having to sit down and film a wrap up. I posted my April TBR a few days back. Have I read even a single word of a single book from that TBR? No. Have I been reading though? Yes, so let's talk about that. I have read one book so far this month completely from start to finish, and that is More Than This by Ness. This has been one of those books that has been like on my mental TBR for the longest time. I'm actually trying to see if I can make my way through Ness's entire backlist. This book is always so interesting because any single time that I would hear someone talk about it or review it, they always said, like, this was always one of those books that people said, I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it, or really this is a book that you should go into really not knowing anything, and that's always intriguing. But I definitely agree with that. So the initial setup is that a boy drowns, and he wakes up in this world that is seemingly familiar to him, but there's also definitely some things that are wrong and are odd and are otherworldly about this place that he wakes up in. Ultimately, with that setup and initial premise, and then just reading the first 40 or 50 pages, I thought that the author, Ness, was setting us up for a story where the main character is trying to find his way back to reality, and then also exploring the kind of other world or other place that he's in. And while that is like a common line that does kind of underlie throughout the whole story, this book throws so many different things at you. There's no way to summarize what happens throughout this book. There's no way for you as a reader to guess what happens next. And Ness, I think, is just very purposeful with his decision to do that, because the way that the story is written kind of mimics what he is trying to do with the theme. I think that I put in my Goodreads review at the very end, I think I said something like, this book is a giant web of pain that I'll be thinking about for the rest of my life, and I stand by that. The overall message of this book is basically that I mean that there is no overall message of this book and it's completely up to interpretation. But if you want my interpretation, it actually reminded me a lot of my all-time favorite book, the message of my all-time favorite book, I Am the Messenger by Marcus Zusak, which is kind of what it means to be an author of a story and how authors create these works of fiction and how that oftentimes is mimicked or paralleled in our own lives, and how we are the authors of our own stories and how we can choose at any given moment to insert a character or to change the direction of our story, and kind of always playing back and forth with, are we in control of our lives, or is there something greater? Is there something more than this? I got to the end of this one and I was like, am I gonna rate this book 2 stars or 5 stars? Like, it was just one of those ones that, oh, it blew my mind, but it also made me so frustrated at points, and I can't explain why, but ultimately I ended up giving this 4 stars. But it's one of those 4 stars where, like, I am not ever going to stop thinking about this book. That's the one book that I have read in its entirety in the month of April. But I want to talk about the audiobook that I started listening to yesterday, and I am already 40% of the way through, and that is The Cost of Knowing by Brittney Morris. I got this as an ALC, so advanced listener copy, through Libro FM. They have this really awesome educator program where if you work in schools in any sort of capacity, you can sign up, and each month they have a bunch of sort of audiobooks where you can listen to them early. I think I have a code, or like not a code, like a link that maybe if you click it, you get something with Libro. I don't know. I really love Libro FM for audiobooks in general, not just because they give me like free audiobooks to listen to. Anyways, I'll leave that link in the description. So I didn't make like an anticipated or most anticipated 2021 releases, but if I would have, this definitely would have been on it. I read Slay from this author. I think that was Brittney Morris's debut book, and it completely took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. So because of how much I loved that one, I was very much anticipating The Cost of Knowing. And then when I heard that it was about sibling dynamics and then also about kind of supernatural abilities or superpowers, I was completely hooked and sold before I even like read it. And then I started it and I could not stop. This is definitely one of those books that for me personally, I was hooked from just the very beginning. Brittney Morris opens up with just a really in-depth point of view of the main character, who has this sort of telekinetic power that when he touches an object, he can see the future of his interaction with that object. He has this kind of really cool otherworldly capability. There's a lot of limits to it that make it really, really frustrating. And just the whole opening sequence describing what this power is and how it works, I was walking around just like with my jaw open. I was so hooked. I haven't had a book this year, or really in a while, that has hooked me from the get-go like this one. Brittney Morris is writing it in a way where there's like just enough questions that I have that are being unanswered. And I'm just really crossing my fingers that I love the kind of second half of this book as much as I've loved the first half. I'm really kind of lukewarm about the narrator, but like the story itself is just so good that I'm kind of drowning out the narrator's tone and just taking the story in, like the words of the story in on my own. And one book that I kind of forgot that I was reading, that I just rediscovered this morning when I was cleaning out my backpack, is On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. I think that I had this on like my February TBR, and I was doing pretty well for a while, and then I just kind of completely forgot that I guess I was reading it. The whole setup for this, it's broken down into 20 different short lessons on kind of markers of a tyrannical reign and what you as a citizen can do to recognize those markers and to prevent tyrannical reigns from happening. It's told kind of from an examination standpoint of the tyrannical reign of Hitler. Timothy Snyder is kind of a historian that specializes in that area of history. This was a title that I saw passed around a lot after the insurrection and domestic terrorist attack on the White House in early January. And I'm torn on really how to feel about this book. I get that the whole appeal about this is that it's short and it's broken down in a really accessible way, but it's just very clear that Timothy Snyder is a historian and is writing from a historian's perspective, because there's a lot of times where he'll bring up references to things that have happened in history, and it kind of feels like he's just making the assumption that the reader will know what that is, and I don't know what that is. So it's almost like I wish that there would have been an index, because I think that the points that are trying to be made would hit a little bit different if I understood the connection that they had in the past. I'm able to follow along enough that I'm definitely learning about what these markers are and how terrifying it is, and how there's just a lot of things from the past that were and are being mimicked in our current reality. And so that is something that it's just good to be informed of and be aware of. I was reading like a chapter a day, and I think that I'm going to pick that back up again, because I can't just leave a book, especially a book as short as this one, unfinished. I've now talked about 3 books that I did not have on my April TBR at all. Let's look at my Libby holds. If you don't know, the way that I picked my April TBR was I watched this older video of mine where I talked about authors that I wanted to read more from, and I used that video as a way to pick books from those authors to read in the month of April. A lot of those books, because they were from authors that I had read from previously, I knew that I probably wanted to own physically. So a lot of them are on their way to me now. I've ordered them, but I have placed some holds. One of them is The Love That Split the World by Emily Henry. This is her debut novel. The only reason that I didn't order it physically was because I know that I own it. It's just back in my storage unit in Arizona. And I was actually really surprised that I had to put a hold on this at my library, just because it's a really backlist title. I always go back and forth when I have to place holds on my ebooks, because it's like I'm glad that someone else is reading it and enjoying it, but also like I want to read it, and I didn't time this well. Another book that I put the ebook on hold on Libby is A Wish in the Dark by Christina Soontornvat. This was a book that got on my radar like a month or 2 ago, just because I heard that it was middle grade and that it was slightly whimsical and fantastical, and that's really all I need to know that I'm going to want to read a book. And then I was watching Tammy's TBR from Tammy Tries to Read. I'll leave her channel in that video linked down below. She has a book club called Chaos Rising or something like that, with a bunch of other fabulous people here on Booktube. I will try to leave, I think there's a Twitter, I'll leave that link down below too. But their pick for this month is A Wish in the Dark. So as soon as I heard that that was the book club pick, I knew that I wanted to participate. I'm just really intrigued by it. I think that it's a Thai inspired sort of folkloric fantasy. Hope that my hold comes in soon. And I'm really getting up there between these 2 and then my original TBR, and then also finishing The Cost of Knowing and adding a completely new book. I don't know who I think I am. Oh, another thing, speaking of my April TBR, so one of the books on there was The Shape of Thunder by Jasmine Warga. I was certain that it came out this month. during my TBR video, I said that it came out this month. It does not. It doesn't come out until May, but I'm desperate to read it and I'm desperate to stick to my TBR. So I ended up like resurrecting my NetGalley account, and it was available to request on NetGalley, but I still haven't heard anything back, and my approval rating on NetGalley is not that great, so I don't know if I'm going to be approved. Really hadn't heard anything about this, but I had a friend on Instagram who included it in her like what she was currently reading, so that's how I knew it was available on NetGalley in the first place. And I was asking her about it, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard anyone talk about this, like what were your thoughts? And she basically said like it was so good, but just be prepared to be emotionally destroyed. And I was like, I'm prepared, but am I? Yeah, so that's my bookish update for this week. After filming this, like now that I've filmed my updates, I don't know if I liked this better than a wrap up. I definitely felt less pressure. I still don't know if it's going to take the place of wrap ups. I'm committed to the month of April, so you'll get a few more of these before the month is over. Let me know in the comments if you have any strong feelings one way or the other towards wrap-ups, both as like a consumer of wrap-ups. Do you prefer watching wrap-ups, or do you prefer watching maybe more chatty recent reads updates, I guess, like this? As a creator, do you enjoy making wrap-ups? If you do, let me know why, because maybe I could use some inspiration. And as always, I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you all very, very soon. Goodbye.